Please welcome to the stage John Halley, President at Paramount Advertising, and Samantha Jacobson, Chief Strategy Officer and EVP at the Trade Desk.
Bright lights.
Oh, yeah. Well, thank you so much for being here. And thank you for making such amazing content. I have to say, between season 2 of 1923 and Landman, you are occupying all of my airline time. So I really appreciate it.
That's very good to hear. We are on an incredible run this year. And it's amazing when you talk about our content, right? We're very, very proud of producing such valuable and meaningful content, see people lean into it.
It's amazing. And I'm curious, last year you had the quote while you were here that Paramount is performance. Mm-hmm. And I would love to start from that place to say, I believe that the marketing funnel is collapsing. And this may be a bit controversial, but I think that advertisers looking to market through Paramount that are only focused on incremental reach are doing it wrong, because I think they're missing out on really important parts of being able to drive performance at scale. I'm curious, as you're talking to different partners and the opportunity they have on your platform, how do you think about the role that advertising on Paramount can play across the different parts of a consumer journey?
So it's true, and I think it's not controversial to us. I mean, I think that this is just the state of the connected environments that we live in. When we've said over the course of last year, Paramount is performance, you've often had to correct people, because sometimes that gets read as, is everything just performance media now? Mm-hmm. And it's not, right? By the way, there are regions where that's the case. If you look at China, where there is no real investment broadly in content, that entire marketplace is mobile and it's performance driven. We live in a different world where television can drive both reach and performance, mm-hmm. right? So there's an and. So let me go into the reach part first, and it's something that you mentioned earlier. I mean, we've been doing this for decades, right? We're very proud of the prestige of the content that we create. We've been doing it for a long time, from the breakthrough shows like 60 Minutes, the world's most enduring franchises, things like Survivor and Landman and Yellowstone, the most pivotal moments in pop culture, right? The VMAs and the Golden Globes and the Grammys, and of course, we're pioneers in sports. You had NFL, college football, PGA golf, March Madness, the Masters, right? These are all incredibly valuable properties that generate unsurpassed simultaneous reach, right? There's really nothing like them. And the size of the audiences are significant, right? Our average NFL game generated 20 million viewers. Wow. We currently have 10 shows across linear and streaming generating 10 million viewers per week. We've got another 10 generating over 5. We create these culture-defining moments, and that is rare in a very fragmented content marketplace. So we're giving advertisers opportunities around audience scale that are very, very, unique. Mm-hmm. I would say, it doesn't necessarily mean that this product needs to be all about awareness, right? We used to say long-form programming, long-form advertising wrapped by long-form programming, delivered on a TV screen and watched by a human does a better job of driving perception and brand recall of that. But as you think about this in terms of a connected marketplace, there needs to be an addendum to that, because it also does a better job connectivity in driving site visits. Mm-hmm. It also does a better job in driving, brand search, right? There are a whole set of performance metrics that it also delivers. And with the fidelity and data sets and signal, right, we're able to show this as a true full funnel mechanism. And that, I think, is a transformative way in terms of how people think about media allocation.
That's so interesting. And you mentioned, just the incredible portfolio of content that you all have as you think about 60 Minutes or PGA Golf. And we as consumers know that when we're watching those shows, we're so engaged and we're paying attention. And yet, attention is one of the metrics that I feel like, at least in my world, has been very hot lately as marketers struggle to figure out, are people even paying attention to the content that they're watching, especially when they're scrolling through social media or whatever it may be. As you are having conversations with your advertisers around attention and engagement, how do you position the opportunity to advertise next to your content and the performance and value that it delivers across those metrics?
Yeah, so, it's interesting. You had said something about the funnel is, we think about the analogy, has it turned sideways, has it been flipped upside down? None of those actually work. The reality is that consumer journeys are becoming much more complex and sophisticated. And it's not really sequenced in the way that a traditional model would suggest, right? It's not like somebody watches TV and they become aware of something, in that format, and then they go do a conversion in another format, right? Yep. There's a lot of fluidity up and down. BCG describes the model as streaming, scrolling, shopping, and searching, which I think is actually a much more accurate way of describing various consumer modes of engagement, all of them of varying, intensity, right? Of those four that I said, I mean, clearly, streaming would probably be the highest engagement, both from standpoint of duration, exposure, and also intensity, emotional state, right? Scrolling probably the least. But, we're very fond of this saying that, what looks cheap is expensive and what looks expensive is cheap. Engagement really, really matters. And, as I said before, I think, what we're seeing as we are, bringing more fidelity around long-form exposure into business outcomes is that it absolutely is the most important element of ad effectiveness, right? And when we get into, we may get into this a little later, but there's a real value question, right? If it's a $3 CPM, but the exposure is less than 1 second, then you would have to, evaluate what the relative efficiency is.
Well, and to that end, I think search and social frequently will talk about the ability to offer cheap reach. But to your point around the value of the reach or the presence of that consumer on there, that can drastically change. And we also, as consumers, recognize the importance of omni-channel activation as we think about my mind state when I'm streaming a podcast on my way to work or I'm at home watching the news. How do you think about the importance for an advertiser to consider a truly omni-channel strategy as opposed to just optimizing for what they may incorrectly see as value when they just look at the cost to reach the number of people rather than taking those other components into consideration?
Well, none of these things can be evaluated in isolation, right? I think that there is an important question around value, and one of the things that we're trying to do is tell that story, right? Is that engagement matters. There's no question about it. I think the omnichannel question brings a very important related point around optimization, right? Optimization around all of these different endpoints, including streaming, mobile, social, in-store, that is becoming the most critical, I would say, element and challenge of marketing these days. And, what's our answer to that as a seller of media, right? We have to be interoperable with the buy-side infrastructure and buy-side systems to do that, right? We always prioritize our partners' data and activation preferences because they sit at the center and they're the ones that are going to understand identity across all these things. Omnichannel is dependent on an incredibly robust signal environment and identity structures. Those things are of, I'd say, varying states of maturity right now. But the entire world of marketing, and this relates to what we were talking about in terms of the funnel and what these different formats do and achieve and what they're goal is and how they interrelate, the entire process of managing media allocation across a variety of formats and environments becomes enormously challenging, and I think represents, I think, the next chapter in evolution for media and marketing.
And I'm curious, you mentioned optimization and that it's predicated on identity. And as advertisers are investing in omni-channel activation, they're obviously spending a lot of time to get the messaging right and to make sure that they're correctly understanding who that consumer is. Yeah. You all have been an advocate of UID2 adoption, as well as multiple other data spaces, recognizing that advertisers may have different priorities. You mentioned the need to connect in that first-party data and making sure you're activating the way brands want. How do you think about the utility of identity in that space? And how do you think about which identifiers to support to have advertisers bring those tactics to life?
So what I would say is that the future of advertising is not going to be dependent on a single identifier. Mm-hmm. It is also not going to rely on proprietary sell-side identifiers, okay? The buyer is always at the epicenter. The buyer, as I mentioned, is the one that's mediating identity across a variety of formats and environments, mm-hmm. right, to understand a cohesive mix impact. Under that model, it is the publisher's obligation to become interoperable with the buy side, with the client's enabling infrastructure. I do think that this is fundamentally misunderstood by a large constituency of our peers and certainly outside observers. The walled gardens offer such significant scale. I mentioned this at the IAB annual leadership meeting a couple weeks ago. Walled gardens offer such significant scale that they don't need to conform to the activation standards of the competitive landscape. Mm-hmm. We're here talking about the open internet, right? The rest of us, the open internet, we exist in fragmented markets, right? And what that means is that we have to make the same that which is naturally different, right? We don't want to be in a position of requiring unique process and unique identity products for substandard scale. Why is UID important? Because it coalesces an entire market around identifier, right? These are the kinds of things, these kind of standardized products are real enablers for those of us who create content and work in fragmented marketplaces. Yep. Cannot emphasize that enough. I think that, related to that, flexing into buy-side infrastructure is another, it's a way to, I'd say, immediately solve the challenges of fragmentation, and particularly in a world that increasingly prioritizes transparency and flexibility and cross-channel measurement. There is no one-size-fits-all here, right? Advertisers do things very, very differently, and it's up to us as a publisher to flex into it. I joke, it's like each unhappy advertiser is unhappy in their own way, right?
All right, Anna Karenina.
But it's I say it as a joke, but you really do. The obligation is up to you to conform to what they need, right? Mm-hmm. Because they increasingly sit at the epicenter.
Well, and I think to that end, walled gardens may have massive footprints, but a lot of them have very opaque measurement. And so I think that translates into a narrative of advertiser, just continue to give me more dollars and I'll let you know how your media is performing within my ecosystem. And so there's not a lot of accountability, and that really hits a ceiling when the advertiser can't continue to improve and they say, well, what else do I do? And the answer is I don't know, my algorithm has maxed out. Mm-hmm. And so I do, and we talked already about the value of the amazing content that's available on Paramount and other places across the open internet. But for that to be effective, advertisers want to measure in their own way. And to me, you all have been incredibly innovative as you think about the opportunity for advertisers to measure. You've also been very bold in the position you've taken to support multiple currencies, whether that's Video Amp, Nielsen, et cetera, but you've really kind of challenged the status norm. I'm curious, challenge the status quo or the norm, both of them, you're challenging everything all at once. Right. I'm curious, in that dynamic, how do you think about your priorities for measurement, and what's your strategy as you're going to market to turn all these different facets on for advertisers?
So first, let me say, around this notion of multiple measurement vendors, we often have heard the phrase, we believe in a multi-currency future. That's happening now. Like that future is now. There just are multiple options for measurement and activation. Forget about linear versus digital, right? And by the way, the opportunities for measurement in digital are vast, right? The amount of identity structures you can bring in, the amount of activation lanes that exist, it's really remarkable, and it can be very much customized. But even if you look at linear measurement, which for 50 years has been dominated by Nielsen, there are also lanes where some of the properties, some of these competitors like VideoAmp and ComScore can really compete, right? All of that depends entirely on the advertisers' unique data investments, infrastructure, the way they resource, the way they choose to target and optimize. There's, brands are all over the place here, and there are a variety of products that allow them to take advantage of their investments. As I said before, I'm going to repeat myself, I think, for like the fourth time, which is like, we view ourselves as, needing to be flexible and understanding, of course, the scale. We're not going to lean into every integration opportunity, but where there is marketplace, like UID, or where there is something that is wreckable, and offers like significant opportunity, it's up to us to do that. This is the reality of the modern media seller, right? We have to understand how to create integration. I think that this notion of data unification is critical because it is a linchpin in omnichannel measurement. Yep. It's a linchpin in connecting linear versus digital consumption. It is, if you think about the legacy of this, it's completely insane to think about. If you could be watching a show in a linear telecast, same show, same episode on connected TV, the measurement and therefore the way the market trades in these two things is totally different on the basis of what cord goes into what jack in the back of your television. It says nothing about the consumer experience. It says nothing about the engagement. It says nothing about the value of the advertised exposure, right? Siloed measurement systems are the enemy of progress. And we're looking to a future where we can see greater connection and the understanding of the exposure across people, regardless of transmission approach.
Yeah, gosh, I couldn't agree more. I really love that. And I think that shift of how do we collapse those silos and how do we recognize the value that consumers are receiving today is so important, especially as we think about some of the legacy planning tools and the legacy things we use like MMM modeling, where you say, okay, I'll tell you in a year how things are going, just pay me a couple $1 million.
And that's like one of the areas I think has a tremendous future in front of it. I think MMM modeling, it's in need of transformation. There is so much more to work with now. And I think we're going to be hearing some very exciting things in that space in the coming years.
Interesting. And I'm curious, we talked about so many things that you're touching on, whether it's identity, measurement, omni-channel activation, demonstration of engagement and attention. I think there'd probably be 40 different work streams, but you talked in measurement about the need to focus on priorities and what bets you want to place. It's hard to believe that we are almost through February already.
Yeah, it is.
And so it's very easy, I think, to peanut butter across a lot of initiatives and end up without making meaningful progress on a couple of key initiatives. If you were to look ahead at the year and you want to make sure you do one thing really well or get one thing right, what would that one thing be for you?
So I think broadly speaking, by the way, it's a tough one. So one has
top
3
3,
bullets.
top 5.
But we want to unlock the value of our programming to brand advertisers, and that means that we need to be sure that advertisers are capturing all available value from the attention we are commanding globally, right? And that is much harder than it sounds, particularly these days with working in fragmented ecosystems. But I would say there are a few things to focus on. The one is who we work with. So we're going to continue to invest heavily in data partnerships around targeting optimization and fidelity around business outcomes. The second is focusing on how our clients activate. So, leaning into buy-side infrastructure, continually leading integration efforts to unlock demand sources. We talk about ad tech is essentially, it's not just the way you activate, they're also demand rails, right? And we need to keep those tracks open. And I think thirdly, it's what we offer. We're going to be leaning very heavily. We have leaned very heavily this past year into commerce media solutions. That idea of extending advertising messaging off the screen and getting it into the consumer's hands through things like QR codes. Very, very important. We need to do that to enable a variety of mid and bottom funnel activity. And we're doing a lot of product development around that right now. So, there's a lot there. It's a little bit overwhelming, but this is it is easily the most exciting time to be a publisher. Since I've been in this business.
Amazing. I would say overwhelming, but also so much opportunity, which is
incredible.
There's
so much opportunity, and I would say that these are the opportunities of the connected marketplace. The television market today bears no resemblance to where it was just 5 years ago.
Amazing. All right. Well, with that, thank you so much for the time today. We really appreciate it. Thank you.